Initial inspection and setup. Always read the owner's manual for instructions on installing and operating your wood stove. First, select the proper location for your stove. These appliances must not be installed any closer than the minimum clearance to combustibles, as stated in the owner's manual. Your stove should be placed away from combustibles such as walls, furniture, draperies, and other flammable materials. Refer to your owner's manual for the appropriate clearances. Set your wood stove on a non-combustible surface, such as a hearth pad or hearth stand. Carefully remove all labels from the interior and exterior of the stove. Remove all parts from inside the stove body or firebox. Unpack all of the contents in a hardware box and lay them out nearby to prepare for assembly. Read your owner's manual to determine the tools required for assembly. Small stove. The small stove will include 2 bricks and an insulation pad to install into the firebox. Going through the collar, which is located on top of the stove, place the 2 bricks side by side as identified in your owner's manual. If done correctly, the brick should cover up the opening, which lets you see into the firebox. Using the same access point as the brick installation, place the baffle insulation on top of the bricks. Begin assembly by threading the large spring handle onto the door handle. Follow the same process to assemble the small air draft spring handle onto the stem of the draft control located near the top right corner of the medium and large stove. For the small stove, the air draft control will be located in the center below the ash lip. If your stove came with a blower, remove it from its packaging and install it on the rear of the stove using the 4 screws and insulation pad provided. Be sure to face the white side of the insulation toward the stove and the shiny side toward the blower when applying the insulation. Align all the holes and screw them 3/4 of the way until all 4 screws are on. Finish by tightening all 4 screws. In order to obtain an efficient burn, be sure to follow the 6 steps listed here. Your stove may be affected by your climate, your home, type of firewood you are burning, and how you attend to your stove. Before loading your fuel into the firebox, make sure all fire bricks are properly secured. Dry seasoned firewood prevents creosote. Green wood or improperly dried wood significantly reduces heat output of your stove and increases creosote buildup in your chimney. Firewood should be stored and dried for 12 months and protected from exposure to moisture. Knocking for a hollow sound also helps determine if it is seasoned. Also look for darkened, dried out ends with cracks called checks. Soft woods such as pine and poplar create shorter burning fires. Hardwoods such as oak, maple, larch, and fir create longer burning fires. Start your fire right. Small hot fires are best. Start by loading 5 to 10 pieces of wadded up newspaper. It is important to use enough pieces of smaller seasoned firewood known as kindling laid in a teepee style on top of 5 to 10 balls of wadded up newspaper when starting your fire. Once this completely burns down, it will create a 1 to 2 inch coal bed, which will be necessary before adding in larger pieces of firewood. Carefully light the paper and kindling in several locations. Stay with the stove and watch the fire to see that it increases in size and intensity. If the fire does not gain intensity, carefully add additional wadded up newspaper, small kindling, or increase the airflow. Be sure to avoid using larger pieces of firewood during the initial burn, as it will take too long to ignite. Open air controls fully and keep them open for a minimum of 15 minutes after lighting. This will allow cold air to move through the front of the stove and enable the fire to burn quickly. Once the initial fire has died down, open the air draft completely and open the stove door. This will help avoid smoke from spilling out of your stove. Using a wood stove tool such as a poker, break down the fuel to create an even ash bed. When breaking down the fuel, create a trough down the middle of the stove from the front to the back. This will allow sufficient airflow from the tube located in the bottom center behind the frame of the door. A successful trough will have the initial ash bed separated into 2 sections. Once the trough is created, put on safety gloves and begin loading logs one at a time. Note larger logs for a longer, slower fire and smaller logs for a quicker, hot fire. Add the full load of seasoned firewood, which would consist of 3 or more split logs, by stacking them with enough room in between so you don't smother the fire. Use a Lincoln log method to load your fuel into the firebox. Place 2 to 3 logs parallel to each other to start, and then 2 to 3 additional logs on top of that in a perpendicular format. Once this firewood is burning strongly, close the primary air control located in the top right corner of the stove for medium and large stoves, or in the center under the ash lip for your small stove. Keep the door slightly open for the first 5 minutes to get the fire burning strongly before shutting it airtight. Never leave your stove unattended while the door is opened. After 5 minutes, use the stove door handle to shut the door so that it is airtight. Yellow gas-like flames indicate that the secondary air tubes within the stove have been lit, which indicates that your stove is burning most efficiently and there is no smoke coming from your chimney. Remember never to leave your stove unattended without closing and latching the door properly. As noted in the owner's manual, open windows when using your stove for the first time, as stove paint may be curing. Getting your stove hot. The key is to get your stove hot so that it will reburn the gases within the firebox. Start with a small hot fire and add larger pieces of firewood one at a time as needed instead of loading with several large pieces all at once. When loading firewood, make sure to open the damper all the way to prevent smoke from spilling out. Ideal temperatures of your stove should be between 400 and 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything less than 400 degrees Fahrenheit will create creosote, which is condensed flue gas consisting of steam and vaporized but unburned carbon materials in the firewood. Anything over 600 degrees Fahrenheit can cause the stove to warp over time. Maintaining the fire. Do not overload the fire, which can cause smoldering, creates too much smoke, produces less heat, builds up creosote in your chimney, and wastes fuel and money. Your owner's manual offers more information on how to control the airflow once the stove has reached its initial hot fire. Keep the door closed. Unless you're adding more firewood, keep the door closed at all times. Never burn garbage such as junk mail, newspapers, or magazines. However, a small amount of paper can be used to start the fire. Recap of a good burn. Begin with a hot fire. Use plenty of kindling. Use only dry seasoned firewood. Do not use big pieces of firewood. Give the fire enough air. No smoke coming out of the chimney indicates the most efficient burn. Never leave kindling, newspapers, flammable liquids, matches, or gloves near the stove. Clear out the ashes in your firebox on a regular basis. Remove and dispose of ashes carefully. They should be removed when they come near the level of the door opening. However, leave 1 inch of ash for the next burn. Clean your glass door. When the door is cool, use a soft cloth or newspaper and a non-abrasive cleaner intended for creosote.